Thanks for staying with us. It's time to go to the press, to lift off the press some fresh headlines that made it to the front pages of some of our national dailies. Our guest this morning is Mr. Biodun Sowunmi, a political analyst. Good morning and welcome to the program, sir.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good. Today we're going to start with assembly matters, from Rivers Assembly to the Lagos Assembly to the Senate, and we'll be discussing that. So let's begin with Rivers State. Fresh hurdle for Fubara as Assembly Wike party insists on impeachment. That is on the Guardian newspaper. That same story is on the Tribune, and it is captioned, "Nothing will happen if Fubara is impeached." That's according to Wike, who has blasted PDP governors and National Working Committee. Rivers Assembly quarters gates was locked as Fubara visited to restate readiness to present budget. We also have a story on Daily Trust which says, "We will defend Governor Fubara." That is according to Ijo Groups. Okay, so let's stay there on the Guardian newspaper. Fresh hurdle for Fubara as Assembly Wike party insists on impeachment. That's your comment on the current development in the Rivers Assembly versus the governor crisis.
Yeah, the current efforts by the governor, to implement the Supreme Court judgment is welcome. It's a sign that the governor intends to comply not only with the judgment but also with the rule of law and allow it to be the foundation for democracy. The unfortunate part of it is that he himself actually destroyed the status of assembly complex as found, by the Supreme Court. So therefore, there's no status of assembly complex, and then you now have the legislators living in their own legislative quarter. So you do not present budget to people in their own homes. You present it in the status of assembly complex. Unfortunately, there is none currently. And the efforts made by the governor to try and address some of these issues prior to his driving to their premises was futile. The meeting didn't happen again because both parties kept complaining of receiving or not receiving letters or having adequate notice or not having adequate notice. I think it's in the interest of Rivers State that at a point both parties need to shift the sword and look at, given the complexity of the situation, what do they do? Is there a provision in the new budget for a new House of Assembly complex? I think those are some of the issues. The governor on his own part should contrite and feel sorry for destruction of the government property, which has created a problem for him now in terms of presenting the budget.
Yeah, but these people are sitting somewhere, and they say wherever the maize is, wherever the assembly members are sitting, even if it's in a primary school, at that time, it's a temporary House of Assembly, so to speak. But this, the governor was locked out, and these excuses that they are giving, do you think they're strong enough? Even though you have said in the interest of Rivers people, there should be peace and whatever is needful should be done. But do you think that's big enough excuse to shut out the governor?
Well, what you see going on is a kind of retaliation in Rivers State, shutting the governors from their own homes. They are right to do that. I mean, the governor will come with a huge entourage, and they all have children and all that. And we know the acrimony that existed prior to now. Both parties were in they were both in their dugout war trenches, and therefore one party or the other would always be anxious. Secondly, we should also not forget that the governor has not paid the remuneration of the legislators for almost a year, and therefore, if he wants to present the budget to them, in my view, I think it's both of them have to give the House of Assembly members should try and tolerate the presentation in wherever they want to see it, not keep poking their fingers at the governor. And again, at the same time, they need to ensure that they've been paid. The governor should immediately pay all the allowances and remunerations, to soften the ground, while at the same time, show some form of regret for the destruction of the House of Assembly. I think these are crucial issues which we should not sidestep. Otherwise, it will not water the ground enough, for the land to be fertile for the presentation of the budget. The governor is stuck, whichever way you look at it, because except he presents it and there's an appropriation law by this Rivers State House of Assembly led by Martin Amewule, there is nothing the governor can do because he won't get the allocation as directed by the Supreme Court. So he himself should at least do a little, even if he can't get some political leaders to intervene and resolve this issue. At least water the ground, pay them the allowances, ensure that there is budget for the construction of a new House of Assembly complex, and try and show some.
But these things you have mentioned, I thought there would be part of the budget where the lawmakers will see and say, okay, you have appropriated this XY amount for the reconstruction of the assembly quarters, and then this is what it is for our own entitlements that we have not been paid for the 4 months. It's part of the budget. I thought that would be something that the assembly members would want to look at and see that the needful has been done in this budget.
Correct. But we should also not forget that that budget had initially been passed by the House of Assembly led by Okojumbo, and his 3 colleagues, which the Supreme Court have said that House of Assembly was invalid in law. So therefore, they already know the contents. I mean, that budget is already being implemented in the state, and they know these issues are absent, in that budget. So I think the governor needs to represent a new budget, reflect the remunerations and the money owed, pay the money owed, and also, try and ensure that a new House of Assembly complex is, the cost of it is included in the budget. And there's nothing wrong in a letter assuring them that the budget is a different one, because he has incorporated this and that in the interest of the House of Assembly. Don't forget that the governor destroyed the House of Assembly to start with. That itself, it's an impeachable offense.
I agree.
I am not supporting.
I agree that they will be aggrieved. There are so many things that need to be addressed and all that. But I thought that whether the budget is passed or not, now that it has been declared null and void, I thought the main aim of presenting a budget to the Assembly is for them to see what is missing and point it out, and see what is not supposed to be there and also point it out. So whatever is missing in that budget, they have the opportunity now to say that this must be part of the budget, otherwise we will not pass this.
Yeah, absolutely. You are correct on that. But at the same time, do not forget the atmosphere is poisoned. They went through a very lengthy political battle. We even see people physically on the ground. There was some level of violence involved. There will be anxiety left, right, and center. And the government needs, in my view, given the recent Supreme Court judgment, the government needs to at least make some more concessions and be more conciliatory, towards the House of Assembly. On the part of the House of Assembly, they also need, in the interest of Rivers State, to rethink whatever they plan to do, and then try and see how they can accommodate each other.
So how do you x-ray the statement of Wike, as we find in the Tribune? Nothing will happen if Fubara is impeached. Well, even though that may be true, but in this context, how do you view that statement?
Well, I listened. I actually watched it, and also watched similarly Fubara's statement when when the judgment was given. Fubara was not conciliatory also. He was, in fact, virtually on the verge of making substitute. And I think what we have seen yesterday was also Wike's response, to that. Also saying that nothing will happen, to the substitute threats made by Fubara. And when you actually listen to it or watch it, you see the analysis that, look, it is only in Bayelsa State that the Ijaws are the major dominant ethnics, and it's not the same situation in other states, Ondo, Delta, Lagos, Rivers. He made those points very, very clear. And that is why he said nothing would happen, because democracy is a game of number. But notwithstanding that, I still think that the leaders, unfortunately, Edwin Clark is dead now. I still think the leaders, the remaining statesmen in Rivers State needs to come together and see how to help smoothing this situation, the implementation of the Supreme Court's judgment. Because some of them have actually taken position, so they found it so difficult, to even mediate, which is quite unfortunate. So the ball may end up being in the court of Mr. President to see how he can help, smoothing the implementation of the Supreme Court judgment in the interest of Rivers State.
Okay, let's leave Rivers State and come back to Lagos State. On The Guardian, it is Tinubu wades into Lagos Assembly crisis, meets lawmakers at Villa. We also have on The Punch, they say Tinubu overrules a Conde panel, backs Obasa to remain speaker. Well, bottom line is Obasa is still the speaker after the meeting with Tinubu, and so many other things went under the carpet that we may not be able to get that information. But talk to us about this crisis in Lagos Assembly and how it has been resolved so far.
Yes, the crisis in Lagos State House of Assembly was very worrisome to many people, particularly keen observers, because the APC appeared at that stage to now be very vulnerable as never before in Lagos State. We've never seen the kind of thing we are seeing, that happened, and suddenly we ended up with two speakers, one in court, Obasa, claiming that he was wrongfully impeached, and the other speaker, Miranda, was installed without a valid plenary sitting. So there were allegations made of corruption, of financial infractions, high-handedness, lateness, and all that. All these were made against Obasa, and so the ball was in the court of the House of Assembly to investigate it. And all these issues were left uninvestigated when Miranda was the speaker. So we also have the Obasa scam also coming with another allegation that Miranda spent 5 billion naira buying cars, even though the Miranda scam claimed that Obasa himself initiated that process as far back as December. Whatever it is, the public seems to be disappointed that while many were taking positions in support of Miranda, they did not know at the same time. The same legislators, opposed to Obasa, who accused him of financial infractions, were also engaged in the process of spending 5 billion naira in 49 days, plus another 1 billion, which is 6 billion naira in 49 days, and particularly on buying its second vehicles for the legislator. So many people were disappointed with that. So if you look at the context, the president had to intervene if they needed to get Obasa to withdraw the case in court. In the spirit of APC family way of resolving their issues, they chose to resolve it, allowing Obasa to remain as the speaker in exchange for Obasa to withdraw the case against the legislators and the former speaker, who is now his deputy, Miranda. I think it's a kind of family affair, one way of resolving their own issues. And it may not be a bad model, even for Rivers State of Assembly, for PDP to adopt, since Wike is still in PDP, along with the governor. So I think they have to look for a way to lower the temperature, the political temperature, and ensure that the House of Assembly can continue to function. The question is, what happens to those allegations made against Obasa by the former speaker, Miranda? It's quite unfortunate because these are issues that should be pursued to its logical conclusion.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's move to the National Assembly as it is. Senate denies, on the Tribune, Senate denies sexual harassment linked to senator's suspension, cites gross misconduct. It's carried by almost all the papers, and they're saying that the 6-month suspension is not because of the allegations that Natasha had on the Senate president, but just because of misconduct. And then they slapped a 6-month suspension on Natasha. I'd like you to comment on that as well.
Yes, when many people focused on the comments made at the Senate by the Senate President, rather than the actual reports of the Ethics Committee. And then the grounds of the Ethics Committee against Natasha was Natasha's failure, to attend the sitting after being invited. And because she failed, she filed a complaint, even though on technical grounds, they felt it was defective. And since then, she has actually corrected those defects and resubmitted them. But since she filed the complaint and she was aware that the Ethics Committee will be looking into those complaints, and she was invited to come and substantiate her complaints and failed to turn up, I think that was the reason given for the actual recommendation of 6 months suspension. But the comments of the Senate President did not actually reflect this. But when you actually read the report of the Ethics Committee, that is what you find there. So that is why the Yemi Adaramodu, the spokesperson for the Senate President, insisted that they did not, violate any court order, but that they simply complied with the House rules in determining a new offense, which is not what Natasha filed in court, which is disrespect to the Senate.
Okay, well, but now this suspension goes against the Senate rules and goes against the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So where did they get the 6 months? Don't you think it's very harsh? Because the Senate rules state that 14 legislative days, I think, should be for the suspension. I don't know if they have upgraded that to something else. And also the Constitution, even the Supreme Court at some point ruled that the Senate has no right to suspend a sitting senator, at least for that long. So how come Natasha is having 6 months suspension? That is half a year, which means that not only is she suspended, the entire constituency that she represents is being shut down, is being suspended from having a voice in the National Assembly.
Yes, it's quite unfortunate that we can find ourselves in this situation, because the courts is not only the High Court, Court of Appeal, and up to Supreme Court, they've actually interpreted the Constitution to say that, yes, the Senate's rules you can implement it by suspending a senator for a period not more than 14 days, legislative days, that is not more than 14 sittings. Because they may sit 1 day this week or 2 days next week and all that, but it has to be not more than 14 legislative days. And unfortunately, we have a senator, Natasha, now being slammed with 6 months. One, I think the 6 months is excessive, because you need to think about the representation, for the people of Ogisa, where she's from. They have to be represented in the Senate. Otherwise, their voices will not be heard. Their representation will not be made, which is against the intention of those who drafted the law. The real reason is that the Senate can maintain some measure of discipline over erring senator, but not to the extent of denying representation for a long time. So I'm sure along the line, if this is not corrected, the court again will rule on it and affirm the Supreme Court's position that she cannot be suspended for more than 14 legislative days.
Okay, on the Punch newspaper, there's a screaming headline here: Lagos-Calabar Highway Project wasteful, corrupt. That's according to Obasanjo, the former president of Nigeria. The writer says Tinubu ignored protests against 15 trillion naira coastal highway project, false 21 billion naira spent on VP residence. Your take, please.
Yes, when you look at the issue of Lagos and Calabar Highway project, many people are not even aware that this was a project conceived before independence in Nigeria by the colonial masters. It was never implemented. After independence, efforts to raise up the issue, it kept, getting in the back burner one way or the other for political reasons rather than economic reasons at that time. Now, we now face a situation where the infrastructure provided, to move goods, by roads, it can no longer sustain the ports and the depots in Lagos. So Therefore, there is a valid reason to think of reopening the ports in other parts. Don't forget, we have the deep sea port also in Sapele closed down. We have deep sea port in Calabar. All of them are less functional. So it's quite very important to ensure that there is another way to reactivate those ports. And one of the ways to do that is to use road and rail, developments as or infrastructure as proxies, for the development of other sectors of the economy, particularly the ports. Open up the southeast, ensure that goods can get to southeast, within a very short time at the shortest possible road. I'm surprised, Mr. President, the former president is only concentrating on Lagos Calabar Coastal Way. What about Badagry to Agbara to Sokoto Expressway? You have that. If that is not wasteful, I don't see why Lagos to Calabar, that would open up the entire, southeast and south-south will be wasteful. I may not agree, because I'm not privy, to the cost of to the costings of that. So I don't know whether the amount voted for it is reasonable or is too high or is too low. I don't know about that, but I'm only looking at the viability of that project and considering it, along with Lagos to Sokoto. If that road, Lagos to Sokoto road is not wasteful, why is Lagos to Calabar road wasteful? And secondly, if Kano to Niger Republic, to Maradi, is not wasteful, constructing not only highway and also constructing, railway to the place, including refinery in Maradi, in Niger Republic. If these are not wasteful, why would a road within the country be wasteful? So I don't know the issues, the parameters, and the factors considered by President Obasanjo, but from my own viewpoint, I think it will open up the southeast.
Okay, but when you talk about infrastructure deficit and you're talking transportation, do you consider road more important than rail? Because even if we have to spend that much money and we want a situation where our roads will be healthy enough to last us as long as we need it to last, shouldn't we be talking about railway rather than a road? It doesn't matter whether it was conceived by the colonial masters or not, but the reality on ground, should we be thinking about that kind of a road when we should have, or maybe we should have alternatives that will work better for us?
Well, to start with, the design of the Lagos Calabar, it's actually a road rail project. The old money is not just for road, it's also for railway construction that will run in the middle of that road to Calabar. So it's in conformity with the expectations of, if I'm to look at your question critically, I mean, it's the road and the rail are going together, pari passu, to ensure that haulage can be moved faster, while at the same time the road is there to facilitate transport and open up, open up about 6 states, to new developments, to new investments, open it up for tourism and open it up for business. Now, but the real issue, I think, the real point you're trying to make is, would it not be better to spend more money on railway projects than road? Simply because it will save us a lot of problems associated with moving heavy goods by road. For instance, we don't have weighing centers, to ensure that the capacity of trucks are not exceeded by the goods we are moving. And we've seen a lot of our roads being damaged, not lasting long once they are constructed. Yes, I agree, railway would be a more effective, cheaper way to move goods from one place to the other. The problem is we still have not completed the railway project, one. Number two, we have also not extended them, to other parts of the country. The railway project only runs between southwest and the north. What about the southeast? What about the south-south? So we need to extend all this, which I think is one of the things that will be achieved with Lagos to Calabar Coastal Highway. Because there'll be a railway right in between it to ensure that goods can be moved by rail rather than by road. And we should also not forget the fact that road is very, very critical. When you want to move goods from the farms, down to the city centers, you don't need the railway. You need, particularly farm goods, agricultural products, you need to construct good roads to ensure that agricultural goods can be moved from the farm, to city centers within a short possible time, rather than railway that does not run all the time like roads. So both are very important and both are very critical to any economy. Okay,
well, immediately after this show, I'm going to that road because the access from Lagos, maybe from Eco Hotel to maybe Lekki and so on, it looks completed. I didn't see a semblance of a portion that will be constructed as a railway. Maybe I missed that because I didn't have this information. So I'm going to that place so that I can argue more intelligently when I'm talking about that road. It's very close to my office, so I'm going there immediately after this show so that the next time you and I meet, I can tell you, okay, you said the correct thing, or I tell you for a fact that this thing is not happening. Maybe I don't have the engineering eyes to see it, but for now, this is what it is, because this site seems completed, complete with the street lights and everything. So I'll go and look at it. That is my own way.
So you may as well check the design. There were publicly available information when the federal government came up. Dave, you might even brought out the map. We could also see the design of the road.
I'm not looking at the design. I'm looking at the finished product. Okay. I will not look at the design. Yes, I will look at the finished product.
You're talking about
the road itself. So it's there. Well, would like to thank you, Mr. Sowunmi, for coming on the show today. As usual, we were very glad to have you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
We're talking with a political analyst, Mr. Biodun Sowunmi, and we were looking at the fresh headlines that were on the national dailies. We couldn't take all of them, but we hope that you will find the papers and read them up on yourself. And one of the headlines I'd like you to read is on Daily Trust that says 6 simple ways to beat extreme heat. This heat is causing problems for us. So you might want to read that story and find out how you can help yourself at this time that is so hot. We'll take a break. When we return, Rivers crisis will be on the front burner. Stay with us.